Hello everyone, welcome back to the 8th lesson of the 3D modeling homeschooling course. In this video we're moving along with the drawing, going in a little bit more to the 3D sketch advanced drawing, and for the most part also introducing to a little bit more tools, but more importantly we are starting to design some very nice object, and for that matter it's going to be a Byzantine architecture. I have an object that I'm going to use as a reference. In the previous video we used an image as a reference, now I'm going to use an object. I can go to import and start browsing for my object, or if I know my object is located, I can just go over here and drag and drop the object. And you see this object was imported literally in a second, which is amazing because it has almost 41,000 faces, and that's quite incredible. If you look at this object, it looks quite nice and a lot of details and quite complex. So first of all, we're not going to model everything today. We're going to take it into parts. But secondly, it's not so difficult to model because it has a lot of repetitive patterns. So let's start zooming in. Today we're going to model the bottom part. So if you zoom into it, you see it's made up of some element over here that looks like probably created with a cube and bended or something, and used as like 3 segments. As you can see, it looks like it has like 3 segments, not very smooth, but it's kind of like an arc shape, but not very smooth. And then it has some fall off over here where it gets shorter and when it connects, and then it repeats itself 16 times. I counted that. You have a total of 16 segments, and the top one, on top of that, is the same. It just meets it in the center, rotated a little bit, and then you have the next one is rotated the same position as the first one, but this is thinner over here. I already measured this, and this depth over here is about 6. And then you have over here also the floor, which is kind of like a circle, but it has then holes, a lot of holes, which is also in circular patterns. So it is very nice. So basically most of them are circular patterns and repetitive patterns. So it should actually be quite easy to model that. So let's start. We'll go to drawing, 3D sketch. I want to draw on top of this. I can technically start drawing on top of this and on this over here, but it will give me a much better precision if I'm drawing on the plane, that the plane is positioned on top of that. I did not measure the height of this, so I can go and measure the height of this and then move up the plane, but I just wanted to show you that you can actually use this, which is a magnet icon, and if you click on it, look at this. This basically positions it very nicely to, let me just zoom out so I can rotate my scene a little bit. So this positions this very nicely on top of it, and this looks like underwater because it's underneath the grid. And now we also know that the height of the plane is 3, so it gave me the measurement as well, and this is very important. I'm going to use it soon. So now in order to start drawing, I'm going to use actually an arc. Let's move down over here. The 2-point arc, that's what I'm going to use. And I'm going to start drawing from here to here, and I'm going to move it, didn't click, and then move it out over here to position the first arc. Then I'm going to do the same thing, start drawing from here to here. I want to be careful. I can actually snap to the object. I'm trying not to snap to the object because the object may not be 100% straight, and the purpose of putting the plane is that I'm keeping it on the plane. So now we're going to draw over here a line to connect these 2 arcs, and the same thing on this side. And here you go. So I'm actually finished with the drawing. As you can see over here, we have something called profile, and we discussed this briefly in the previous video, that a profile is not more than, it could be called profile or sketch, but this is used just to create something. So before I create something, actually, I want to show you some idea how you can do it. So I'm going to hide the other object. So let me just hide this object for a moment. And I want to show you that if I want to get the exact measurements, so I can select this object again, I can select this edge and go to scale and start scaling it and get the size of it. But it gives me a 2D transformation. It doesn't give me the Y because a 2D think this is like flat, it's 2D, it's just one edge. You can't scale it in the height at this point, but on this plane you can scale it X and Z, so you can start scaling, but then you need to know the math, exactly how long the line is, how to convert that. I can also go local transformation, which will give me a little bit more easier to scale it, but still it wouldn't help me a lot. So how do I get a single measurement to give the exact size of that? So I'm going to use actually deselect, so I have select entire object, and I'm going to go to the measurement tool. We've used the measurement tool before, but we didn't look at this particular feature in the measurement tool, where I can measure from point to point over here, and then this actually gives me the length of 6. Wow, I made it perfect, so it's actually very nice. So now let's measure from here to here, and this is 5.3. Over here I did not snap them perfectly. So if I'm going to resize that, you see there's options start, finish, or both. I want to equally scale them. So I'm going to type in over here 6. This will basically resize this. And I can go to each of them and make sure each of them is sized the same, or I can play with this option, resize entire object. But that's basically the idea how you can resize them. Let me just do this, because resize entire object wouldn't give me, I think, what I want. I think we'll resize the entire not proportionately. So let me just resize them, everything over here. You see they're almost the same, but not perfect the same. I could have done this in different ways, but just wanted to show off this tool. I'm not sure, I may have missed one of them. Let me see. Yeah, this one I've missed. Okay, so now we have everything is 6. So we have the size is good. So now I'm going to use something, it's called fill polygons. I think we've used it before briefly. So I go fill polygons. This creates now a new mesh. So I want you to pay attention to it, that the fill polygon created a new thing that it's called mesh. You can always rename these things, but SelfCAD will give you a hint what it is. The previous was a profile, and now once you create a mesh, it selected this and it created a new object and named it mesh. So this kind of gives you a hint that this is already a 3D object that is a mesh. It still doesn't have something that's called volume, because it's only one plane. It may be called a surface. A surface is not limited to a plane, which basically implies it's flat. A surface could be twisted, bended. A surface has a wider definition, but it's not a volume. A volume, an object, a mesh is technically means that has a 3D object that has some volume, and this is only one plane or one surface, so it's not really, it doesn't contain anything. You can't put in something with a hold because it doesn't have any volume to it. So in order to add volume, I'm going to go to the add thickness tool in the modify tool, and I can add thickness over here. I want the height to be 3. We know the height is 3, and then we'll put the height to be 3, but because I drew this on a height of 3, so now we're going to need to move this down. So I can just make it -3, and this will give me both at the same time. So it basically positions it on the floor, and I got my height that I need. Okay, so now that I have this done, I need to create the circular pattern. But before I create the circular pattern, I can actually get rid of the profile already, so I see exactly what's happening. So let's get rid of the profile. And okay, so to get the circle pattern, I'm going to select this object again, and I'm going to use a tool over here that is called inset. So I'm going to select both sides, and I'm going to go to inset, a tool we did not use before, and enter number 1. I want to make it individual, each side individually, and I think in future, in this case, it doesn't make a big difference. If you have multiple faces, it makes a difference. I think we'll use that a lot, and I need to explain still extrusion, inset, both of them. With all of the details, they both have a lot of different tools, including macros, but for now I'm just gonna use the basics, and hopefully we'll have a chance to explain it on a different occasion. So I'm going to finalize this, and now I'm going to go to the scale, and I'm going to turn to my local transformation, and I need symmetry because I'm going to use the gizmos and I want them to be symmetrical on both sides. So I'm going to scale them out a little bit to create this kind of fall off effect, and that's it. Here you go. So now I have the basic shape, the first element, but now I need to create the circular pattern. So to create the circular pattern, there's a standard technique. SelfCAD has it in the copy offset. We've used copy offset before, but we did not use this particular tool. In the copy offset is something called pivot, and many software call it the same, but most CAD software have the same, regardless how they call it, have the same tool. And this is 1, so I need to have a total of 16, so I need to make 15 more copies. Before I make the copies, I want to explain a little bit how this tool is working, what this tool is doing. So this tool is going to make copies, and it's going to make the copies as it rotates, and it will rotate by default, as you see, 0, 0, 0, which means the center of the scene. And we explained that in the first video, I believe, where 0, 0, 0 position. I can change that position, but by default it will rotate around this position. And if you rotate around a pivot, not around the object's pivot itself, just around an outside pivot, the further away you are from the pivot, the wider rotation you get. The closer you get, the shorter you get. Meaning is, if I'm going to move this very closer to this, you will have they will intersect much faster because it will rotate in a very narrow circle. If I make it further away, you may have multiple gaps. But because I drew this initially on the object, I'm assuming and hoping this will be the same distance that it's supposed to be, and it will give me the expected results, and 15 copies should be enough. So let's give it a try. And here you go, it's wonderful. So all is set with this, but you can see this is a slightly different color because the first one is not selected. Self-code will by default select what you worked with. So it selected all of the copies, but it deselected the original ones. I need to select this as well. And once I have all 16 selected, I can go to Stitch and Scoop, and I can go to my union, and we should be done. So I have this one. So now I'm going to make a copy of this. I can use a copy the same way I did before. I can hold down my control key and go to the move, but I want to introduce the other copy option. So two more ways to making copies. One is the command copy, command C, which makes a copy, or click copy over here. But this by default makes a copy and positions it in a different location. It offsets it. This is a standard practice in many applications, just to make sure you know you have a copy. Otherwise, people keep on clicking make copies, and because it's not recognizable, so they just offset it. So let me undo this. This is not what I'm looking for. The other option is in copy offset. Despite its name, this creates an offset, but if you don't put in anything to make a copy, it makes a copy in place. So now you have a copy, and you see what the problem is when you have another copy in place. It's not visible. That's why you basically need them to be offset. Or you can use what I used before, the move tool, and position them. For now, I'm going to scale this copy. I want this copy, this will be higher by the same height of 3. But I'm also going to move it up from the ground a little bit so they're not flushed with the bottom. And if you remember, we said in the previous lesson that when it comes to Boolean Tool, especially in working with complex shapes, you don't want objects to be flushed with each other. So I'm going to scale that by, instead of making it 6, I'm going to make it, let's say 5.9. 5.9. So hit enter. What? 5.9. Oh, it is scaled. If I zoom into it, it's still positioned on the same thing. It's only scaled the height. That's why I didn't see it. And you have to scale this side as well. So this side is 180. I want to make it to, I think 170 would be flushed exactly. So I want to make it slightly going into it. I'll make it 171. And you see I checked both, so they both go the same way. And now, if you remember before, I teach you before that if you scale and move, you should first scale and then move, because now I can go to my move tool and I can make it 0.1 from the floor. So now we should be fine, these two together. Now I need to rotate this and position it in the center of this. So I need to rotate around the green axis, and I want to show you something, that whenever you're going to use the rotation, if you're within the protractor, it will give you more like rougher steps, bigger steps. If you're outside, it gives you smoother steps, but that's also not always the case, because SelfCode has recently added something, minimum step size. If this is set to 5, even if you go outside, the steps would be 5, so you need to bring it down. But in any case, this gave me the proper results, so I'm happy, so I'll leave it. Now I need to make the next copy. So I'm going to take this, and again, I'm going to go to the copy offset, and I'm going to make a copy in place, and I'm going to scale it. So I need to scale it in the height. We know the same idea. Instead of making it 9, I'm going to make it, let's say 5.8. Just have some variations, make sure everything intersects. 5.8, and I'm going to make this, instead of 160, let's say make it 161. 161.2, just to make sure we have everything intersects places. Actually, this one was the narrowest, so this actually should be a little bit more, because if you remember, this was thinner than the other. Didn't measure it, but let's just see. We'll figure out approximately. And now once it's finished scaling, I'm going to position it from the floor. I'm going to position it, let's say 0.2 from the floor. Okay, so now I got this. Actually, I did something wrong. Why is it not sticking out enough? I have to scale it more. How much did I scale it? Oh, okay, 6 watt. I wanted to make it, yeah, 8.8. Okay, 8.8. I'm sorry. So now I'll need to move it again to 0.2. Okay, so now we should be fine. So now I have all of these 3 objects. I'm going to select this and this. I'm not very happy that this is not thinner, but I think actually this looks nicer for this design, so let's leave it. And I'm going to combine these three, and as you can see, process very well. This is if you're going to make them flushed, you may sometimes get an error, and this is not a good idea. So that's why I'm putting attention, making sure that kind of have variations. It's not perfect. Okay, so what we'll have to do now is the circular part, the inner part. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go to the tab view and start drawing on it, and I'm going to go to my 3D sketch again, and I'm going to use a circle. I'll make a circle of 16. I don't think I need such a smooth circle. And I'm going to simply eyeball it because this is not going to be visible because it intersects. If you've seen, I didn't show it in the initial one. It looked like it intersected almost entire thing, not entire thing, because the crease that you see the difference of fall off was from the back side visible only partially. So it looked like it's kind of like this. It didn't fully intersect. So I'm going to do the same thing now. And now I'm going to create small circles, but I'm going to create it in a new profile because otherwise I'll need to later split them off. And because I want to make the pivot, again, rotation, I don't want to rotate the entire circle. I want to rotate just the small circles. So in order to create a new profile, there's a few ways. You can go from here, not from here. If you go over here, profile settings, you can click on a plus to make a new profile, or you can just go over here and uncheck. In the scene, if you uncheck and you start drawing, it will create a new profile. So what we're going to do now is, I didn't measure the distance from here. I'm just going to eyeball it, and I'm going to put in a circle, and I'm going to type in let's say 3. Let's make it a nice circle for 3, and then I can actually measure the distance between them. I should have probably, but for now that should be fine. So I'll make 2 circles of 3. Actually, this is too close to each other. I think the design called for a little bit further away. So not too far away, because then they'll start intersecting when I pivot them around. So let's say 3. Okay, so I got these 2. Now let's see how I can pivot them around. I go to the copy offset, and I go to the pivot, and I'm going to make 15 copies. The same idea. I'm gonna make 15 copies, and as you can see, it looks beautiful. I just need to select the first one, these, and I'm going to, I want to fill polygons, but I can't because you have too many objects. You only fill one object, so I first need to merge them. I'm going to merge them, and once they are merged, I can go to fill polygons. I'm going to fill them, and I need to add a thickness to them, a height. I'm going to add thickness, and in this case my thickness is going to be, I can be any number. I just want them to be height because they're going to use only to cut out. You'll see in a minute. So I'll make it for 10, and now I'm going to go back to select my circle that I've drawn, and I'm going to fill this as well. This is fill polygons, and I'm going to add the thickness to this. In this case, the thickness needs to be 3. I'm going to make the same idea -3 because it's drawn 3 on top. So I have a -3, but I still need them to make, because now they're flushed. You see, they're not really coming out. So I will need to move up, and also this circle has also been drawn 3, so I need to move it up at least by 4, or 3 something. So let's make it, move it up by 4, and that's why I have 10. I have enough. This is sticking out. Let's see, it is sticking out. You see, it sticks out, so that should be fine. It sticks out by 1, basically. That should be fine. And I'm selecting these 2, and I'm going to go stitch and scoop, and now we're going to use the difference. And I'm going to subtract this, the circular pattern, and as you see, we created the holes. So I'm going to finalize this. So now I have this. I just need to reposition this on the floor, and I think now I can position it on the floor, and I want them to be flat on the floor. So because the others were offset, I think this should be fine to position them on the floor. So I position them on the floor, and I can get rid of the profiles. I see what's happening. Let's get rid of the profiles. So let's see over here. Let's deselect this, select this profile, select this, and click delete. Okay, so now we can select this circle plus this, it's the outside, both objects, and we can go stitch and scoop, and we can go union. And okay, so here you see actually that did not like, you see this error, did not like that it's flushed with the bottom part. So I do need to move it up a little bit, this particular one. So let's see, let's move it up a little bit. I'm going to move it up from the floor by, let's say, 0.2. I can later go and flatten them out and put another one, or move up the other part. Actually, I can move up the other parts as well. Let's undo this, put it 0. Let's move up the other parts. Will probably be a better idea. Let's move up this part, And let's go to the move tool and move this up to 0.2. Okay, something like that. Could have made probably 0.1 as well, but let's go now. And here you go, it's completed. You see the being flushed, that's not a good idea. In some applications, specifically like in Blender, for example, you can finalize, they wouldn't give you an error, they will finalize it, but then if you go to 3D print, you'll end up having not manifold meshes, and that's not a good idea. So I actually like better the idea that they warn you it cannot be done, so you don't create bad geometry. So in this case, you got everything over here. The only problem I have here that we have too many objects, I mean too many faces. So you see you have like 46,000 faces. That's quite a lot. So what I'm going to do now here is I'm going to use the not resolution, simplify object in this case, and I'm going to simplify it. Let's see how much I can simplify it. Simplify, yeah, it's simplified without. It still looks relatively okay. See, it starts to make it look a little bit choppy, but look how much it brought it down. It brought it down to just 4,680 faces, which is quite remarkable. So I think that's it for today. And in the next lesson, I hope we'll start creating the pillars and then moving up to the other parts. I hope you learned something, and please practice, and we'll start moving on. A few more lessons, and hopefully we'll have covered the entire application. Okay, wonderful, and see you soon, the next one. Bye.